What happens when an abandoned second wife accidentally texts her deepest, most intimate frustrations to a ruthless mafia boss instead of her best friend? A dangerous game of obsession, a multi-million-dollar cultural tug-of-war, and a woman who refuses to be bought twice. You won't guess how this ends. Somewhere in Africa, a vast and ancient culture dictated that a man's status was carved from the number of wives he could claim. It was an intricate web of tradition that stretched across continents, binding women to a single patriarch who ruled from afar. For Sophia, a 25-year-old mother of two, this tradition had traveled with her all the way to a quiet suburb in America. But the distance hadn't fractured the system. It had only amplified her isolation. Sophia was the second wife. The first wife remained in the ancestral homeland, managing the family's deep roots. Sophia had been sent to America, a move that promised opportunity but delivered a gilded, lonely exile. Then came the third wife, a younger woman established in Kenya. For the past year, their husband had abandoned his American household entirely, choosing to live in Kenya with his newest bride. Sophia's phone was her only tether to this sprawling marital network, but it brought no comfort. In their culture, a husband's role wasn't to provide emotional intimacy, passion, or companionship. It was strictly about lineage. He cared for the children as extensions of his name, but the women themselves were left to starve for affection. Like so many others in her position, Sophia was expected to suffer in silence, a faithful ghost in an empty American apartment. But Sophia possessed a quiet defiance. She was too young, too vibrant, to let her spirit wither away in a house filled only with the echoes of a man who had forgotten her. The silence of the apartment was suffocating past midnight. Lying awake, feeling the heavy burden of her youth wasting away, Sophia opened her messaging app to vent to her childhood friend, Yar. In a blur of raw, unfiltered frustration, she typed, "Girl, I am so horny. Imagine this man has forgotten me at my age, 25 years old with 2 kids, because of his third wife. It has been so long since I had him on my bed, and honestly, right now, I need a man who will spoil me tonight." She hit send, but a sharp spike of adrenaline hit her chest. The profile picture wasn't Yar's. In her exhausted, trembling state, she realized she had sent it to a contact she'd accidentally saved weeks prior, a glitch from a second-hand phone she had bought, where international cloud data had merged a stranger's secure number into her list under a typo. Desperate to erase the mistake, her frantic fingers slipped. Instead of tapping delete for everyone, she hit delete for me. The message vanished from her screen, but it was already gone into the world, irreversible. Thousands of miles away, in a secure penthouse overlooking Seoul, the message flashed on the private line of Kang-dae. Kang-dae was a towering, heavily muscled Korean mafia boss. He was a myth in the criminal underworld, a man so imposing and ruthless that nobody dared to look him in the eye. Yet behind his absolute authority lay a profound, aching loneliness. He was surrounded by sycophants and enemies, but he had no one who saw him as human. When Sophia's raw, accidental confession flashed on his screen, it struck a chord deep within him. She wasn't afraid of him. She was just a lonely soul craving to be wanted. Intrigues turned into an obsession. Kang-dae had the resources, the audacity, and the absolute authority to get whatever he desired. He didn't care about the boundaries of her marriage or the oceans between them. The hunt was on. At first, the communication was terrifying for Sophia. When the stranger responded, her heart nearly failed her. But Kang-dae did not threaten her. He spoke to her with a calm, heavy intensity that she had never experienced. Slowly, the terror softened into a hesitant curiosity and then into a full-blown addiction. They began to talk for long hours deep into the night. While her children slept, Sophia would sit by the window, the glow of her phone lighting her face. Kang-dae listened to her. He didn't just ask about her day. He absorbed her words, valuing her mind and her frustrations. For the first time in her life, a man made her feel visible. The excitement of his messages became the anchor of her day, a secret thrill that made her feel alive. But Kang-dae was a mafia boss. He was not content with just words on a screen. Using his immense reach, he traveled to America, establishing a presence in her city. He began to track her movements, watching over her from the tinted windows of black CVs. Sophia had no idea she was being followed, but Kang-dae was learning everything about her. He saw her at the park with her 2 young children. Instead of being deterred by her family, the sight touched something rare in him. He watched how fiercely she loved them, how gentle she was, and a dangerous, beautiful vision formed in his mind. He didn't just want a mistress. He wanted to take Sophia and her children and build a complete, fiercely protected family of his own. Knowing everything, Kang-dae began to aggressively invite her out. "Let me take you to dinner," his deep voice would command over the phone. "Let me show you what it feels like to be taken care of." But Sophia refused. Severally, she turned him down, terrified of breaking the strict moral codes of her upbringing. She was a wife, regardless of how abandoned she was. Yet, Kang-dae's audacity was relentless. He didn't accept the word no. He kept pushing, testing her boundaries with a magnetic confidence that slowly eroded her defenses. Finally, after months of resistance, the loneliness became too heavy, and Kang-dae's pull became too strong. Sophia accepted a dinner invitation. The date was flawless. Kang-dae treated her like royalty, shielding her from the world, watching her with an intensity that made her blood run hot. He was attentive, strong, and entirely focused on her happiness. For a few hours, Sophia forgot about Kenya, forgot about the 3rd wife, and forgot about the cultural shackles binding her. But the fantasy fractured when he escorted her back to her apartment building. Standing in the dimly lit hallway just outside her door, the air grew thick. As she turned to say goodnight, Kang-dae stepped forward. His large, scarred hand gently but firmly gripped her arm, pulling her against his massive, solid chest. He tilted her chin up and kissed her, a deep, possessive, intoxicating kiss that left her entirely breathless. Sophia couldn't speak, her mind short-circuiting under the sheer force of his desire. Shocked and overwhelmed, she broke away, turned the key, and ran inside her apartment, locking the door behind her. Instantly, the guilt slammed into her like a physical blow. She stood in the dark hallway, listening to the quiet breathing of her children sleeping in the next room, her heart hammering against her ribs. "How am I going to do this?" she thought, tears springing to her eyes. "I am cheating on my husband." But then a fierce, angry counterthought rushed through her mind. Why do I even compare it to cheating? He has many wives. He is in Kenya right now with another woman, completely fulfilled, while I am left here to rot. Do I not have a right to be loved? To be touched? To be happy? A violent storm raged in her head. She felt like an unfaithful, ruined woman, a traitor to the traditions of her people. She thought of the other women in her culture back home, women who endured this exact neglect until they died quietly, their spirits broken. Why couldn't she just stay faithful like them? What was wrong with her? Yet every time she tried to cut contact and ignore Kang-dae, the memory of his warmth, his unwavering focus, and the profound safety she felt in his presence pulled her right back. She loved the way his eyes never left hers. She loved that he didn't view her as a machine for bearing children, but as a woman to be fiercely protected and spoiled. The guilt and the desire twisted together, a beautiful, agonizing torment. As Sophia realized she was standing on the edge of a precipice, and the life she once knew was gone forever. For 3 long weeks, Sophia chose the safety of silence. She built a wall out of her guilt, ignoring Kang-dae's persistent calls and letting his text messages pile up unread. Every time her phone vibrated, lighting up the dark bedroom with his name, her heart would leap into her throat, but she resisted. She forced herself to look at her children, reminding herself of the strict cultural code she was bound to, trying desperately to be like the women back home who suffered their abandonment in quiet, dignified devotion. But Kang-dae was not a man who accepted silence. He was a king in a world of violence, a man who bent reality to his will. Her silence did not deter him. It only fueled an obsession that burned hotter with every passing day. On a Tuesday night, the rain beat a steady, rhythmic tattoo against Sophia's apartment windows. The kids were fast asleep in their room at the end of the hall, and Sophia lay in her own bed, wrapped in a restless, heavy slumber. The apartment was completely dead to the world, locked tight against the American suburbs. Or so she thought. Through the fog of her sleep, a sensation broke through. It wasn't a sound, but a shift in the air, a sudden, heavy warmth that settled over her bedroom. Then came a touch. A large, calloused finger gently traced the line of her jaw, the skin rough but incredibly tender. A deep, gravelly voice cut through the dark, whispering directly into the quiet space above her pillow. "I miss you." Sophia's eyes snapped open. Her breath caught violently in her throat, freezing in her chest. Sitting right there, on the edge of her mattress, was the towering silhouette of Kang-dae. The dim moonlight filtering through the blinds caught the sharp angle of his jaw, the intricate tattoos creeping up his neck, and the terrifying, unblinking intensity of his dark eyes. His massive hand was still cupping her face, his thumb softly brushing against her cheek. A wave of pure, primal terror crashed over her. Her heart didn't just beat. It hammered frantically against her ribs like a trapped bird, the adrenaline so sharp it made her dizzy. How was he here? How could a man of his size bypass the locked front door, the building security, and move through her home without making a single sound? The absolute vulnerability of being breached in her own sanctuary, while her children slept just feet away, was an existential dread that paralyzed her. How did you get in here?" Sophia gasped out, her voice a fragile, trembling whisper. She tried to pull back, but her bedsheets tangled around her legs, keeping her pinned beneath his gaze. Kang-dae didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between them was loud, dripping with the dangerous aura of a predator who had easily breached the fortress of her morality. He simply leaned closer, his massive frame casting a shadow that seemed to swallow her whole. The scent of rain, expensive leather, and tobacco filled her senses. "You ignored me," Kang-dae murmured, his voice laced with a dangerous edge of possessiveness that sent a shiver straight down her spine. Yet, beneath the threat, there was an undeniable, aching vulnerability. "You thought you could just disappear back into this empty life? Back to a man who doesn't even know the color of your eyes anymore?" "Shouldn't be here," she cried softly, tears of panic and overwhelming emotion blurring her vision. "Please, my children are in the next room. If anyone sees you, if my husband finds out—" "Let him find out," Kang-dae interrupted, his grip on her jaw tightening just enough to command her absolute attention, though he was careful not to hurt her. He leaned down until his lips were mere inches from hers, his hot breath fanning across her face. "Let him come across the ocean and try to take you from me. He won't survive the night." The raw, casual violence in his words was terrifying, but as Sophia looked into his eyes, she saw something else. She saw the same profound, suffocating loneliness that she battled every single night. He wasn't just a monster who had broken into her home. He was a man starving for the only woman who had ever made him feel human. Her fear began to warp, twisting into a chaotic, intoxicating mix of terror and deep, visceral excitement. No one had ever fought for her like this. No one had ever broken through walls just to see her breathe. Her hand, trembling violently, rose between them, her fingers hesitating in the air before gently resting against his massive, scarred chest. Beneath her palm, she could feel his own heart, beating with a heavy, fierce rhythm that matched her own. "You are a dangerous man, Kang-dae," she whispered, a tear finally escaping and slipping down her cheek onto his thumb. "Only to the world, Sophia," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips before rising back to meet her eyes with a promise that felt both like a rescue and a beautifully gilded execution. "Never to you." Sophia tried to wrench herself backward, but the bedsheets tangled around her legs like a trap. She pushed her hands against Kang-dae's massive chest, her muscles straining against his solid frame, trying desperately to create distance. But he was a fortress. With a slow, unyielding pressure, his large hands clamped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. She wanted to run, to scream, but the terrifying proximity of his strength and the heavy silence of the apartment paralyzed her. "Let me go," she breathed, her voice cracking. "I will leave on one condition," Kang-dae murmured, his dark eyes locking onto hers with absolute authority. "Give me what I want, or I will stay right here on this bed until your children open that door in the morning." Panic flared sharp and hot in Sophia's chest. The thought of her children finding a dangerous, scarred stranger in her bedroom was a nightmare she couldn't risk. "What do you want?" "Kiss me." Sophia's breath caught. She looked at his resolute jaw, felt the undeniable magnetic pull of a man who had crossed oceans for her, and yielded. Closing her eyes, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his. What began as a desperate concession instantly ignited into something fierce and breathless, a deep, possessive clash of hunger and relief that left her mind spinning. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with triumph. "Tomorrow," Sophia gasped, her chest heaving as she tried to regain her footing. "I will meet you for lunch. Just please go." A slow smile touched his lips. He released her, stepped back into the shadows of her room, and vanished as silently as he had arrived. The next day, the tension shifted into something beautifully intoxicating. They met at a secluded, upscale restaurant, and the conversation flowed with a dangerous ease. The terror of the night before melted into a vibrant, electric connection. As the weeks bled into weekends, their secret meetings evolved. Kang-dae was no longer a shadow in the night. He became a tangible, protective presence in her life. Soon, the weekend lunches turned into day trips, and inevitably, the children became part of the picture. To the kids, Kang-dae introduced himself with a gentle warmth that contrasted sharply with his lethal aura. "I'm a friend of your family," he told them, his deep voice softening as he knelt to their eye level. He bought them gifts, listened to their laughter, and protected them fiercely whenever they walked through the city. Sophia began taking the children out for weekend meals with Kang-dae, and a new reality began to form. Sitting across from him at a sunny restaurant table, watching him cut up food for her kids or wipe a stray mark from her son's cheek, Sophia's heart swelled with a feeling she had never known. For the first time in America, she felt safe. She felt like there was someone always there for her, a partner who anchored her in a foreign land. For Kang-dae, these family meals became his sanctuary. Sitting with Sophia and her children, surrounded by their warmth and innocence, the aching void inside his chest finally closed. He didn't feel like a mafia boss feared by the world. He felt alive. He felt a profound, deep-seated peace. He looked at Sophia across the table, her eyes bright and her laughter echoing in the space between them, and he knew he could never let her go. He had finally found a home, and he was willing to burn down anything that threatened to take it away from him. The invitation to his house was delivered not as a demand, but as a reverence. When Sophia arrived at Kang-dae's secluded estate, her heart was a chaotic mix of anticipation and profound peace. Walking through the heavy arched entryway, she felt the sheer scale of his world grand, quiet, and fiercely guarded. Every step she took deeper into his home felt like leaving her old life further behind. Her thoughts were no longer plagued by the frantic what-ifs of her cultural duty. Instead, they were anchored entirely in the present, attuned to the steady rhythm of her own breathing and the magnetic pull of the man waiting for her. Kang-dae met her in the grand hallway, his dark eyes softening the moment they landed on her. He reached out, his large, warm hand enveloping hers. "I invited you here because I wanted this to be official," he murmured, his deep voice vibrating with an intense, raw honesty. "I want to be intimately, deeply connected with you. No more hiding in the corners of the city." He led her toward his private quarters. As the door swung open, Sophia's breath caught. A path of rich, fragrant flower petals began at the threshold, tracing a vibrant trail across the polished hardwood all the way to the expansive bed. The room was bathed in the warm, golden glow of candlelight, casting soft shadows against the walls. Sophia felt no fear. The terrifying mafia boss whispered about in the dark did not exist in this space. Here, he was simply her protector, her anchor. Looking at him, Sophia completely opened her heart. The heavy, suffocating mantle of being a forgotten second wife fell from her shoulders. She forgot about the husband in Kenya, forgot about the rigid traditions that had starved her spirit, and let go completely. When he drew her into his arms, the intimacy between them was fierce, tender, and absolute, a true blending of two lonely souls who had finally found their harbor. They lost themselves in each other, the hours dissolving until the outside world ceased to exist. Suddenly, a glance at the clock shattered the spell. The afternoon had vanished. It was time to pick up her children from school. Flustered but glowing with a profound, newfound happiness, Sophia parted from Kang-dae with a lingering kiss and rushed out into the afternoon air. The transition back to reality was a blur. She picked up the kids, their innocent chatter filling the car as she drove back to her suburban apartment. Throughout the evening, as she cooked dinner and put them to bed, her skin still tingled with the memory of Kang-dae's touch. She felt a lightness in her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. Late that night, a heavy, deliberate knock echoed through the quiet apartment. Sophia's heart leaped with a sudden, joyful spark. Kang-dae, she thought instantly. A bright smile illuminated her face as she practically ran to the front door, eager to open it and find her fiercely protective lover standing in the hallway, ready to surprise her. She unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door wide open, the words of a warm greeting already forming on her lips. The smile froze on her face. The warmth in her veins instantly turned to ice. Standing under the harsh, buzzing fluorescent light of the apartment corridor was not the towering, tattooed Korean man who had held her hours before. It was her husband. He stood there with his luggage at his feet, his expression detached and demanding, carrying the heavy aura of the culture she thought she had finally escaped after a year of absolute silence in Kenya. The man who held her legal vows had returned to her doorstep without a single word of warning. Sophia opened the door wider, her body moving on pure mechanical instinct. "You are welcome," she said, her voice hollow, falling into the rhythm of the traditions she had been taught since childhood. Her husband stepped into the apartment, bringing with him the heavy, familiar aura of patriarchal authority. He did not ask how she had been, nor did he embrace her. He simply expected his homecoming to be seamless. Sophia went to work immediately, performing every duty required of a traditional wife. She carried his luggage, prepared a hot meal, poured his water, and served him with her head bowed. In their culture, a husband was a king, and his arrival demanded absolute servitude. But while Sophia's hands performed the rituals, her heart was entirely absent. It was locked away in a candlelit room filled with flower petals, belonging completely to another man. When night fell, the true test arrived. Her husband expected his marital rights, but Sophia felt a visceral wave of repulsion at the thought of his touch. For the past year, he had abandoned her for his third wife in Kenya, treating her as nothing more than a placeholder for his lineage. Now, filled with the self-worth Kang-dae had awakened in her, she couldn't bring herself to submit. She stepped away from the bed, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders. "I will sleep on the couch tonight," she said quietly. Her husband's brow furrowed in sharp irritation. "What is this? Why are you keeping your distance from me?" he demanded, his voice booming in the quiet room. "I am your husband. You have no right to withhold yourself from me." Sophia kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her jaw set. She gave no explanations, no excuses. She simply walked out of the room, leaving him alone. But the victory felt fragile. Trapped under the same roof as her legal husband, a deep panic set in. She pulled completely away from her phone, ghosting Kang-dae entirely. She was terrified that if she responded to him, the explosive tension between her traditional duty and her forbidden love would tear her life apart. For days, Sophia ignored Kang-dae's calls, moving through her suburban life like a ghost, suffocating under her husband's demanding presence. But Kang-dae was not a man to be shut out. He had watched her apartment. He knew her husband had returned, and he had seen the exhaustion taking over her face. On a bleak Thursday afternoon, Sophia drove to the local supermarket, desperately needing a few moments of solitude away from her house. She parked her car and began walking toward the sliding glass doors, her mind heavy with worry. Suddenly, a sleek, black SUV pulled up along the curb, cutting off her path. Before she could even process what was happening, the rear door flew open. A large, heavily built man in a tailored suit stepped out, but behind him was the unmistakable, towering frame of Kang-dae. Without a word, Kang-dae stepped forward, his massive arms enveloping her. He lifted her swiftly off her feet and guided her into the back seat of the vehicle. It happened so fast, so silently, that to any onlooker, it looked like a coordinated kidnapping. The door slammed shut, and the SUV sped off into the traffic. Sophia didn't scream. She didn't fight. She sat frozen as the car navigated the city streets, eventually pulling through the high gates of Kang-dae's secluded estate. He led her inside, his touch firm but remarkably gentle, and guided her to the plush leather couch in his grand living room. He sat down right next to her, his massive frame sinking into the cushions, his dark eyes studying her face. Sophia remained completely quiet, staring straight ahead, her posture rigid and distant. The overwhelming weight of her reality made her feel numb. Kang-dae watched her for a long moment, the silence between them thick and heavy. When he spoke, his deep, gravelly voice was devoid of anger, only filled with a profound, steady understanding. "I know he is around," Kang-dae murmured, leaning closer so his shoulder brushed against hers. "And I know you are confused." Sophia's chest tightened, but she still didn't look at him. "I will not force you into anything, Sophia," he continued, his hand resting gently on the couch behind her, creating a safe, protective boundary around her. "But whatever you decide, let me know. For now, just relax. You have been working so hard serving him since he came. I have seen you. I know how exhausted you are." A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek at his words. Her legal husband, the man she served hand and foot, hadn't noticed her exhaustion at all. But this Mafia boss, a man feared by thousands, had been watching over her, recognizing her pain from afar. "My phone is always a call away," Kang-dae said softly, his voice a steady promise in the dark. "When you make your final decision, I will be waiting." He didn't press her for affection. Instead, he had his staff bring out a beautifully prepared meal. Sitting together on the couch, the suffocating tension slowly began to melt away. Kang-dae talked about his world, making dry, quiet jokes that finally broke through Sophia's icy exterior. Soon, She found herself smiling and then laughing, the sound ringing out like music in the quiet room. For a few hours, the heavy burden of her traditional marriage vanished. When the meal was over, Kang-dae had his driver take her safely back home. As Sophia walked back into her apartment, the contrast was blinding, but her mind was clearer than it had ever been. The final choice was looming, and she knew she couldn't run from it much longer. When Sophia walked back through her front door, the heavy, suffocating air of the apartment hit her immediately. Her husband sat in the living room, completely absorbed in his phone, expecting her presence only to serve him. Without a word, she moved into the kitchen, mechanically washing the dishes, sweeping the floors, and preparing his tea. She wore the traditional mask perfectly. But once the chores were finished and her husband was occupied, Sophia retreated to a quiet corner of the master bedroom. She leaned her head against the cold wall, staring blankly out the window at the suburban American streets. A profound, agonizing question echoed in her mind. How am I going to live like this? Was she truly going to spend the rest of her youth as a submissive, ghostly second wife? Was she going to starve for affection in America while he enjoyed his life in Kenya? Or wrapped himself in tradition back home? The awakening she had experienced in Kang-dae's arms had permanently shattered her ability to suffer in silence. She realized that staying faithful to a man who didn't value her was not a virtue. It was a slow, psychological death sentence. Her mind solidified. The hesitation was gone. Pulling out her phone, she dialed Yar. "Yar, listen to me," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling but fiercely intense as soon as her friend picked up. "I am leaving him. I can't handle a polygamous marriage anymore. This man will go on and on with his life, adding woman after woman, and I am expected to sit in this house and wait for him like an object on a shelf. Yari could bring a disease home from his travels and kill me before my time. I could die just from the worry, the thinking, and the absolute loneliness, while he enjoys his life elsewhere. I value my life. As much as I want a stable family for my children, my health, my mental health matters more. I am leaving this marriage." On the other end of the line, Yar gasped, the weight of the cultural taboo heavy in her voice. But as a true, supportive friend who had witnessed Sophia's years of silent tears, Yar closed her eyes and sighed softly. "Sophia, if you have reached your breaking point, then you must save yourself," Yar said, her voice laced with deep empathy. "Our culture teaches us to endure until we break, but you are too vibrant to let yourself be buried alive. But you must be smart. A man like your husband does not let a wife walk away easily. Protect your children, guard your steps, and do not let his anger make you doubt your worth. I am with you." Sophia knew leaving wouldn't be as simple as packing a bag. In their culture, marriage was an unbreakable legal and financial contract sealed by the exchange of wealth. When her husband had married her, his family had paid a massive dowry of 200 cows to Sophia's clan. The moment Sophia sat her husband down the following evening and delivered her decision, the illusion of his calm detachment vanished instantly. "You are leaving?" her husband roared, slamming his fist onto the dining table, his face contorting in absolute fury and disbelief. "In our culture, a woman does not leave her husband. Who do you think you are? You are my wife. If you walk out of that door, you leave with absolutely nothing." He stood over her, his voice booming with patriarchal authority. "My family paid 200 cows for you. If you want a divorce, your family must return every single head of cattle immediately. And don't you dare think about taking my children. They bear my name, they belong to my lineage, and they stay with me." It was a devastating threat. Sophia's family back home could never afford to return 200 cows. It would ruin them financially and bring immense shame upon her clan. And the thought of losing her two precious children made the room spin. It was the ultimate trap, designed to force rebellious wives back into submission. But her husband did not know about the shadow standing behind her. That night, through a single, tearful phone call, Sophia broke her silence and told Kang-dae everything. The next morning, the heavy silence of the suburban neighborhood was shattered. A convoy of 3 sleek black SUVs pulled up to the curb outside Sophia's apartment building. The car doors opened and several heavily built men in dark suits stepped out, forming a formidable perimeter. From the lead vehicle, Kang-dae emerged. His towering, muscular frame was wrapped in a tailored black overcoat, the intricate tattoos on his neck visible beneath his collar. His expression was completely unreadable, radiating a cold, lethal authority that made the air feel thin. He didn't storm the apartment. Instead, he sent his personal attorney and a top-tier security detail up to the door, while he waited at the base of the building like an unshakable fortress. The attorney handed Sophia's husband a formal legal document alongside a secure international wire transfer confirmation. Kang-dae wasn't just offering a legal defense, he was executing a total financial buyout. The market value of the 200 cows, multiplied to account for the insult, was transferred directly into the husband's accounts in a matter of seconds. The message delivered by the guards was silent but terrifyingly clear. The dowry is repaid tenfold. The children stay with their mother. If you contest this, you are no longer dealing with the traditional family dispute. You are dealing with the Korean Mafia. Faced with the staggering financial repayment and the overwhelming, lethal presence of Kang-dae's men, the husband's arrogance crumbled into stunned, intimidated silence. He realized he was utterly powerless against a man who possessed both limitless wealth and absolute ruthlessness. Sophia walked out of the apartment building holding her two children tightly by the hand. She looked down at the courtyard where Kang-dae stood waiting by the open door of his SUV. He looked at her, his dark eyes filled with an intense, unwavering devotion, ready to usher her into his world of luxury and absolute protection. But as Sophia reached the sidewalk, she stopped. She looked at Kang-dae, and then she looked back at the apartment building she had just escaped. The realization hit her with the force of a sudden gale. If she stepped straight into Kang-dae's car, she would simply be moving from one patriarch's control to another. Her husband had bought her with cows. Kang-dae had freed her with millions. "Kang-dae," Sophia said softly, her voice steady and echoing with a newfound strength. He stepped toward her, his brow furrowing slightly. "The car is ready, Sophia. You and the children are safe now." "We are safe because of you, and I will always hold that in my heart," Sophia said, looking him directly in the eye, refusing to lower her gaze. "But I am not getting into the car." Kang-dae froze, unaccustomed to being denied. "What do you mean?" I just spent my entire youth waiting for a man to dictate my life, my health, and my worth, Sophia declared, a beautiful, fierce pride illuminating her face. If I move directly into your house, I am still depending on a man to survive. I need to know who Sophia is on her own. I need to build a home for my children with my own hands. Kang-dae stared at her for a long, tense moment. His men watched anxiously, waiting to see how the volatile mafia boss would react to being rejected. But as Kang-dae looked at the fierce independence burning in Sophia's eyes, his cold demeanor slowly melted. A profound, genuine respect softened his features. He realized that the very spirit that had made him fall in love with her mistakenly through a text message was a spirit that could never be caged by any man, not even him. "Where will you go?" he asked quietly. "I found a small apartment near the children's school," she smiled, holding her kids closer, "and I start a job on Monday." Kang-dae bowed his head slightly, a gesture of absolute reverence. "My phone is still a call away, Sophia. I will watch you build your empire from afar. And when you are ready, I will still be waiting." Sophia turned and walked down the street, her posture upright and her head held high. For the first time in her 25 years of life, she wasn't a first wife, a second wife, or a mistress. She belonged entirely to herself, and that was the greatest freedom she could ever claim. The story of Sophia is a modern mirror to an age-old struggle. While the presence of a protective ally like Kang-dae adds a cinematic twist, the true core of her journey is not about choosing between two men. It is about a woman choosing herself. For women across the globe who find themselves trapped in the isolating, emotionally neglectful cycle of polygamy, or any marriage where their humanity is minimized, Sophia's journey offers several profound, life-reclaiming truths. To every woman navigating the suffocating shadows of neglect, your worth is not a transaction. It cannot be bought with a dowry, measured by your ability to bear children, or dictated by a culture that demands your erasure. Like Sophia, you have the right to look at your life, evaluate your happiness, and decide that you are worth fighting for. Stepping out into the unknown is terrifying, and the systemic, cultural, or financial barriers can feel as massive as a herd of 200 cows. But the fire inside you to live, truly live, and not just exist, is more powerful than any tradition meant to keep you small.
You
Build your own foundation, claim your own voice, and remember, the most sacred choice you can ever make is to choose yourself. Would you have left with the mafia boss, or would you have walked away on your own 2 feet like Sophia did? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments right now. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this journey, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have another intense, unforgettable story dropping next week that you won't want to miss.